the Double Shot. I am in the Gold Coast studio today with a couple of dipsticks. And I literally, Schmidt, Schmidt, producer Nick, it sounded like I was talking about you guys being dipsticks, but I've actually got dipsticks in my hand.
I was going to say I'm in the studio with a dipstick and also some confectionery.
I found these old school double shot dipsticks, orange and cherry flavoured, naturally.
Nice.
And brought them in for producer Nick, actually, and that was 2 weeks ago now. They haven't been eaten.
I've seen they were sitting over in that bowl and they've made their way over to your side of the room pretty quickly, so I imagine you're going to be into those at some point today.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Mitch, welcome back again.
Thanks for having me.
I think James is back on Australian soil late this week, I believe, but you know, whether or not he's up to actually joining us next week is another story.
Another week off, it's no issues my end. Just let me know and I'll be in here with a run sheet.
Well, speaking of old school things, we did talk last week, so we got to back up. We talked about our favourite instant iced coffees, or instant as in like basically you can buy at a servo iced coffee.
Yes.
You have gone to the point of rating and putting in the notes. Run us through your favourite iced coffee review.
Unlike you, who no doubt forgot that we were going to do an iced coffee review, I remembered. And my iced coffee of choice is from Suntory, who make a lot of Australian and international favourite beverages, but it's the Boss Ice Long Black. And I see you turn your nose up at that. And I agree, flavour-wise, not the best. But
only flavour-wise, that's why.
I'm all about convenience and best served cold in a can, crack it, gets the job done and gets you ready for your 8:30 a.m.
And you've rated it?
Yeah, 5 out of 10 flavour, 10 out of 10 convenience.
Oh, my God. I think the last time we, potted together, we were rating packets of chips.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Did you actually go to the trouble of getting an iced coffee and doing the review or not?
I have drank many dirty iced coffees in my life. I gave Farmers Union a hot mention last week, and I think I also mentioned Dare. Dare is still my favourite, but now it's more of a unique treat, and I give it a 9 out of 10 for flavour. It only loses 1 point because of how much sugar it's got in it. You got to get the double espresso, but also 10 out of 10 for convenience. Although back when I was having at least 2 a day, this is we're going on 8 or 9 years ago. Yes, just absolutely jacked. Yeah,
you shouldn't be alive.
Jacked up on sugar and caffeine. Still am, but just not in the same drink. And they weren't at all servos back then. Today they're much more widely spread, and they've got great ads on TV. But yeah, Dare Espresso, Dare Double Espresso, absolutely number one iced coffee.
Yeah.
Producer Nick, do you have any opinion on that actually?
For anyone that didn't hear that, because we're occupying the 2 mics we have today in the studio, Nico said that they are laxative city. So I just thought I'd share that. But
ironically, his favourite.
His favourite one. But hey, speaking of...
So we see you drinking a Dare, mate. You're shredding.
Speaking of iced coffees, I'll tell you who wouldn't be having iced coffees. It's Nedd Brockmann. I can't start or go through this podcast without mentioning Nedd Brockmann.
Okay, so admittedly, and this might be like a social crime right now, but I actually don't know who he is. Please tell me.
He is one of Australia's great men, 22-year-old tradie from Sydney who has decided to run from Perth to Sydney in 46 days. So I think he's finishing on Monday of this week. He finished on Monday of this week at about 5 p.m. and he averaged about 80 kilometres per day running across the journey, across 46 days. So that sort of equates to almost 2 marathons a day on average, and got it done, raised $1 million for homelessness across the country, charity called Mobilise. And what a man. If he doesn't win Australian of the Year, I will go he. You're my boy! So worth a follow, Nedd Brockmann. Get around him. It was a great effort.
He'd actually be a very good ambassador for Dare.
You reckon?
Yeah. I mean, would he drink them?
Blonde mullet.
He's a tradie.
Yeah, party at the back, Nedd at the front.
Oh, that mullet that you showed me before, wowzer.
Yeah, that's him.
Now, one thing he won't be doing because he's too busy running is desk bombing.
Oh, you are.
Are you accusing? What's going on?
You're a serial desk bomber. I don't know. Have you heard it? The AFR wrote an article, and it's like buzzwords and concepts emerging from corporate offices.
Yeah.
And one of them's desk bombing, which is the term they've coined for people that prior to sending an email will just come and bomb your desk, right?
Oh.
Which admittedly I am.
There's like three people that immediately come to mind. 100%.
Like they're coming to your desk without trying to think or sending an email first or anything like that. So they're desk bombers. And there's also another one called phone aversion, who are millennials or people between or up to the age of 40 even that are scared to ring people on the phone.
Oh, that is so true.
So it's sort of these sort of shifts in the corporate world.
Phone dodgers.
And I thought desk bomber and immediately thought of you.
I bomb my own desk. For starters, I bomb my own desk. No, very interesting phone aversion. That's I got something to say about that, but
so
it's really important.
We've got a outbreak of shyness and intolerance to interruption. So there you go.
I'm not surprised at all. I'm going to completely go like skid left here and share the stat fact with you this week, which is kind of on topic of the podcast. Is that cool?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
Play the stinger.
Stat fact.
The stat man.
Stat fact. So this is not about desk bombing or like miles and kilometres run across the country or iced coffee. It's actually about like our land use. There you go. Oh my God, this is just like completely off the flavour, if you will, of this pod so far.
Oh, cheap laughs.
The flavour. So I found this interesting. 80% of the value of goods and services produced in Australia is generated on 0.2% of our land. So basically that'll be like your capital city land that's, occupied by industrial and basically all those things that provide all of our gross domestic product, essentially. Economic activity is concentrated in CBD, with Sydney and Melbourne accounting for 10% of all that economic activity in Australia, which is more than 3 times the contribution of agriculture. I got this out of a really interesting article about the use of land and essentially how economists have increased its importance over time. Now, not a discussion for today. It goes into the Industrial Revolution and all of that, and it's really fascinating. But I just thought that was a pretty cool stat fact. 80% of the value of goods and services produced is done on 0.2% of our land.
That is a great stat fact. Now, I know you're not a fan of the pop quiz, but it's in line with this stat fact.
I do.
How much in square kilometres do you think our total land content is in Australia? So you said we generate 80% of the value of goods and services generated on 0.2% of our land. How much land do you think we've got in Australia in total?
Oh, well, you wouldn't know this unless you'd gone and bloody researched it over the weekend, would you?
Just take a wild guess.
Wild guess, 7.6 million.
Producer next to the rescue.
He comes up with the goods. Well, listen, 7.6 million square kilometres, that's the size of Australia.
That's correct. So 0.2% of that's about 152,000 square kilometres, which is about 1.5 million hectares. So still a fair amount of land when you put it in that context. But great stat fact. Just thought I'd
all I do
weasel
know,
a little pop quiz in.
All I do know is your desk bombing weasel is that
stat fact bomber.
His stat fact bomber is that Australia has less than 1% of the world's population, but we have 5% of the world's land mass. So we're actually quite a big country, but, relatively small population-wise, which is, why it's many reasons why they're sending people over here. But, that kind of adds out.
And my man Ned covered a bit of it in the last 46 days.
Oh, you covered a lot of it. Go figure that out,
amount.
that percentage.
Oh, 3,800 kilometres. So whatever the percentage
I thought you were just doing quick maths in your head.
God, no.
Oh, about 3,800 percentage points of the decimal takeaway pie.
Oh, very good.
All right, we're back now. We talked about all the market research you've had to do, which is bulk iced coffees the last few weeks. You are actually looking a little edgy. You've been shaking a little bit.
Yep.
Jacked up. How many no-dos, those caffeine pills that we've all heard about back in the day, Monsters, V's, Red Bulls, however you will, how many of these stimulants do you think the visa applications department are rocking at the moment out of Canberra?
Oh, look, I'm assuming that department's located in Canberra, and I'd go as far to say that across the general general area, you would not be able to buy a No-Do's in any 7-Eleven within a 10K radius of that department because they have been busy, haven't they?
They've had a backlog of 2 million visa applications.
They've processed 2 million.
2 million backlog. Jeez. That's what you used to say your Instagram DMs had a backlog of. But,
2 million unread messages, you reckon?
2 million. Dramatic much.
No, you're dead right. They've processed 2 million visa applications since 1 June. And the backlog currently sits today at 880,000. So I think recently Andrew Giles, who is the immigration minister, he has come out to say that they've spent or they're spending in the process $36 million to appoint an extra 500 staff to process the backlog of visas. They've got 260 of those 500 employed and they're training the balance. So they're certainly making a big dent, but certainly looks like visa applications are up and people are wanting to, move over here.
Well, I mean, the numbers here, about 2.2 million new visa applications were received since June 1, up from nearly $495,000 for the same period last year.
Yep. And that's, that's obviously in light of the recent increase to the permanent migrants intake from 160 to 195, I think it was. Obviously that, they're getting busy processing it. But I made an observation and I'm going to share it with you.
Do tell.
Don't you think it's ironic, right, that they're spending $36 million to go and employ 500 people to process visa applications based on an intake increase that was designed to fix the labour shortages we're having? It sort of comes full circle.
That does.
Look, I say that tongue-in-cheek. It's definitely worthwhile. And the Grattan Institute modelling has reported that the intake, if it proceeds at, the 195,000 for the next decade, will generate up to $33 billion in economic benefits as a result of the additional intake. So definitely worth it. Short-term pain for long-term gain.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And wasn't there that discussion, some economists are saying, this is the last decade we'll get free migrants.
Yeah, absolutely.
Free being, we don't have to put the donut on the end of the fishing line and actually seriously incentivize them to come in. Now it's sort of good enough that we'll grant them. Maybe we've relaxed the skills requirements. It's a great place to live, English-speaking country and all that. There'll be a time in Australia's history where we need them, but there's not 2.2 backlog.
100%.
2.2 million, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. And currently there's a little bit of a challenge as well with like your temporary skilled migrants that can come in on what's like a visa where they're sponsored by a business. And as part of that, you've got to qualify to the minimum income threshold. It's called the T-SMIT or the T-SCHMIT, as we call it over here.
Because I call you
temporary skilled migrant income threshold, which is currently 53,900, and it's been frozen basically since 2013.
Which is mental.
Which is in light of inflationary pressures and wage growth and all the rest of it, you're sort of probably below minimum wage there, I would say. So the unions are calling for that to be increased to 90,000, which would potentially wipe out almost, I think, 60% of recent temporary skilled migrants that have come in.
Right.
And then obviously the Chamber of Commerce is saying, we don't need it at 90,000. How about 60? They think it'll land somewhere around 70,000, but even that would still wipe out 35% of recent temporary skilled migrants that have come in. So, there's a lot of sort of moving pieces to bringing more people in, but I think the short of it is that we need to do it because we don't have enough people to work in the labour market.
Well, filtering the new labour and the skilled migrants coming into Australia, they're going to need somewhere to live.
Oh, yeah.
Schmidt.
Yeah.
That will directly impact housing.
Yes.
Good, bad, indifferent, rentals, capital, growth side, etc. New South Wales, we all know, extraordinarily expensive state to break into. Sydney, Greater Sydney, $1.4 million median house price. The New South Wales state government have introduced, and they've talked about this a lot, but now it's brought in for first home buyers. If they buy a property up to 1.45 million, which by the way they've called an entry level property,
probably not far off in Sydney though.
It's not far off. It's just sort of like staggering, where they can basically opt to switch from the stamp duty tax, if you will, that you pay when you purchase, which is or I want to say about 5 to 5.5% of your purchase.
Yeah, well, on a $1.2 million home, it's about $50,000.
Okay, right. So they can opt, instead of paying that, which is a big lump sum at purchase when you settle your property, they I just punched the thing, sorry. They pay a land tax, which is an ongoing land tax for the life holding of the property, but it's calculated on the value of the land.
Yeah.
So I'll get you to run through your numbers in a moment because, not bad. Back of the envelope numbers, not bad. But interesting how it might stimulate the market there for that $1.5 million and lower bracket, because now people need less money up front to get in.
Yep.
So, are they sort of bringing it back to life, or will it soften the blow of, Sydney softening quite a bit?
Yeah, there's certainly opinion out there that the upfront savings could be absorbed by the additional increase in property prices for that segment of the market, given that the purchasing power of first home buyers in that regard are increased by this latest proposal. And you're dead right. So you get the choice to pay the stamp duty or subscribe to an annual land tax fee, basically, that you pay for the life holding of the property.
Which, by the way, you wouldn't normally pay a land tax if you're an owner-occupier. You wouldn't pay it. You'd pay the stamp duty, bang, big whack up front.
Absolutely. So using that $1.2 million example that I referenced, land tax on that would be, the stamp duty on that would be $50,000, or you could pay 0.3% of the land value plus $400. So they're saying the land value on that's approximately 60% of the purchase price, and therefore your annual fee in year one would be about $2,560. And by year 10, depending on, the increases in land, because that will determine how much you pay, you could be paying as high as something like $4,700 if you get a 7% growth rate compounding over 10 years.
The value of what your land is worth.
But interesting that it is available to investors as well, first home buyers that choose to, rent
Very
investors.
interesting.
However, you get stung a little bit more. So instead of the 400 plus 0.3% of your land value, you're paying $1,500 plus 1.1% of your land value. So using the same example, that'd mean you'd be paying about $9,670 in year one, and could go as high as sort of $17,079 by year 10, based on that same 7% growth rate. Ooh. So I think that, all I'd say is absolutely, if the entry barrier to getting into the market is your upfront, deposit and costs, then this is a no-brainer for owner-occupiers for sure, and potentially to investors as well, because the alternative is not buying. But there will be a break-even point where at some point in that holding, you will hit a point where it's cheaper to have paid the upfront stamp duty, depending on how long you hold it for. A lot of moving pieces, but I personally think it's a good idea. It will certainly act as a stimulatory effect and will likely increase property prices and purchase powers of those buyers that qualify.
Amen. All right, so interestingly now there's a lot of noise, if you will, and I like to say, Mitch, that a lot of it is short-term noise and it takes our eyes off the long-term headspace that we need to be in, especially when we're talking about real estate and property. Like, as soon as you switch to the short term, you're looking in the wrong place, because that's when, you're trying to get in and out quickly and make a quick buck or whatever. But really, real estate is long term. Now, there's a lot of bad media, and there's a lot of smaller guys that are trying to basically bring it down to a real simple numbers base and just say, hey, we're trying to bring down inflation. And this guy here, Luke Harris, he had a bit of a commentary in an article recently, and he just talks about the Reserve Bank and basically how inflation is sitting at an annual rate of 6.8%. It's down from 7% the month prior. So basically, yes, the Reserve Bank have put up interest rates and inflation has come down, albeit slightly. That's exactly what they're trying to do. So essentially, we will be very well placed moving forward. Totally hijacked this, sorry. But essentially, he's sort of one of the guys saying you've got to ignore that media hype, because it could end up costing you. Now, interestingly, and you like to give him a little bit of shit here, but he is somewhat of a buyer's agent or something like that. So it's kind of in his interest to
I don't know Luke Harris at all, and certainly not giving him shit. I admire it because
Look at this
like
guy.
I admire Nigel Satterley and like I admire Mr. Hutchinson, our man is running a little bit of an agenda with his commentary, saying that effectively
Giving him healthy shit.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree. Like the numbers he has quoted are correct in that inflationary pressures have eased. The ABS is reporting that in the 12 months to September, inflation sat at 6.8% versus in the 12 months to August where it sat at at 7%. So it's dropped by 0.2% over, that month. And therefore, going as far to say that the interest rate increases from the RBA are working, right? So in that, it derives to, goes as far to say that investors shouldn't hold their breath and should continue to buy, same with owner occupiers, all the rest of it. And basically that you're not going to be able to pick the top or the bottom of the market. And I agree with him. I don't think you can sort of, try and do that. And particularly I know with my investments, I know you're the same, you've got to take a long-term view. And interest rates are still at very low levels compared to, when they started, in the early 2000s. And the property market hasn't seen a slowdown in the same sense that we saw in the late 80s when the last time we were increasing interest rates. So, yeah, look, I think there's no evidence of mortgage stress. Particular segments of the market, if you're careful, are still ones that you should be investing in. And, I like it. So hats off to Luke Harris, the CEO of Property Mentors, even though I think our man is running his own agenda, which I admire.
Full quote. You're giving him a full quote there. Well, it's a terrible segue, or maybe it's not, Mitch, but there has been some suggestions that the average tax rate could hit record highs this decade, and that's with or without stage 3 cuts.
Sheesh.
Is that a terrible segue or is that a terrible segue?
Oh, I don't know if you'd call it a segue.
Well, it wasn't a segue,
I would have
really,
run
was
like,
it?
geez, I hope inflationary pressure's easing because we're going to be starting to pay more tax.
Hey, all right, take it away then. Tell us a bit about it.
Only kidding. Yeah, so I think that what you're saying is correct, that there's economists out there forecasting that we will see record high average tax paid in Australia over the next 10 years. So I think the average tax rate as of today sits at about 23%. And they're saying that basically if inflation continues, wage growth will continue and all of that's going to lead to us potentially seeing an average tax rate increase from 23% to as high as 27%. And that's assuming that the stage 3 tax reform is rolled out. If that's scaled back, which is, obviously giving relief to taxpayers, then we could see as high as 28%. So that's a pretty significant increase and the highest that we would ever have reached. I think we got to 26% in about 2000. But yeah, since then we haven't gone anywhere near it. So more tax is coming by the looks of things, which means that, yeah, we're going to bloody get less pay packet unless of course we're doing things to minimise our taxable income.
Oh, like what? Like buying property,
there's a
things
couple
like
of
that.
things that spring to mind. Very good.
Look, I think you perfectly put that together. And I mean, we should mention though that if you're paying more tax in 10 years or whatever the end of the decade is suggesting, they've also factored in inflation, but also significant wage growth. But yes, you will be paying a higher percentage, so you will be paying record tax if that happens. But you're exactly right. That's why you can't, I think Kerry Packer said, I'm all about paying tax, but as little as humanly possible. with very savoury and legal loopholes.
Yeah.
Savoury and legal loopholes.
Yes, absolutely. And we would never even dare give out tax advice to anyone. And this certainly does not constitute advice at all. But it's the reason, I guess, we always try to target brand new properties because you can maximise your tax benefits more so than buying established.
I think producer Nick's just pulled up the classic quote, and it was basically what I said.
It's a great quote. Even at the best part.
It was basically what I said. I'll quote him. I pay whatever tax I am required to pay under the law. Not a penny more, not a penny less. And by the way, it's just a little bit hard for me to read here, but if anybody in this country doesn't minimise their tax, they want their heads read because as a government, I can tell you're not spending it that well. Should we be donating extra?
Well, they're spending 36 million of it employing more people to process visa applications.
Yeah, well, hello. And they're getting paid a fairly good wicket. So there you go. I listen to Kerry Packer. If it was me, and it is me, I'm listening to Kerry. God rest his soul.
Now, there's only one man and one man only that, whilst holidaying around Europe, rolling pasta, running around Tuscany, swimming in the bays of Majorca, would send us articles to ensure that we address them on the podcast. And that man is our fearless leader, one James Fitzgerald.
Gee whiz.
And he's done just that. So,
It's so true.
It would be remiss of us not to address it. And it's the work from home concept. Actually, quite a good article.
Very good article. Mitch, not to say we wouldn't have read it anyway,
Oh,
but he just
well,
wanted to make sure.
Yeah, well, he knows that we definitely wouldn't have read it.
Whoa.
And he knows that you wouldn't have been looking for it to put in the run sheet. So he's just sort of saved us a bit of time and sent it to us. But it is a fantastic article. And it
Flat
talks
out
about...
desk bombing.
My word.
You'd be desk
Flat
bombing
out.
with this.
Flat out.
So he's done a virtual desk bomb. And,
Yeah, he's done a virtual desk bomb.
I'll tell you that much.
No, look, if it's not the biggest social shift to have happened since the pandemic, it's certainly in the top 3, and it's the whole working from home phenomenon even. Jeez. Jeez. I haven't have I?
Phenomenon. Sorry, that's an old school rap. Yeah,
Oh,
no,
no.
you're right. It
There's
is.
a
It is.
soundbite.
And the most recent census data, and I think this is maybe why James sent it, because he's a bit of a census
Nerd.
guy, loves it, indicates that 2.5 million Australians worked from home in the last 12 months, basically. So that equates to about 21% of the working population, whereas in all of the censuses prior to that since 1996, we've averaged at about 5%. So 2016, 5% of the working population worked from home. And as at 2021, in the census period, which was in, I think, August or something like that, we had 21% working from home. And the question that's raised is it temporary, or do you think it's going to be something that sticks around? So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Being in Melbourne, a capital city, I think that it will stick around for those who work right in the CBD, no matter what industry. If they work right in the middle of the CBD, they will be able to have the flexibility to work from home a couple of days a week. Because it's a bit of a shit show commuting into the city. Even today, when we're not fully back at occupancy in the capitals, it's still a shit show getting in. So yeah, but look, I mean, it's the recurring conversation right now. So look, I don't really know, but I did have a bit of a laugh at this capital city work from home peak numbers.
Yeah.
The peaks from each city, and then I suppose for some of them here, their peak, very expensive suburb.
Yeah, absolutely.
that hit the highest peaks. So Sydney, capital city peak was 39% of people working from home. 68% of those were in Balmain.
68% of people working from home in Balmain.
Very sexy
Jeez.
suburb.
Yeah,
Maybe
very
they got the
sexy.
best cafe, so they're like, oh,
Also, they may have suitable homes with offices and all
That's
that
true.
type of stuff. So that makes sense. Yep.
yep. Melbourne peaked, I don't even know how this happened, but 29%. I feel like our peak was way higher
Less than Sydney, even though lockdown far more.
Go figure.
Wow.
I've got no answers for you there. But North Fitzroy, 55% of that. And I can tell you they definitely have the best cafes.
Oh, 100%.
1,000%. Brisbane, 18%. Adelaide, 10%. I'm actually surprised at how high that is. And Perth, 8%. Hobart, 7%.
Yeah, Brisbane very high considering we didn't have many lockdown periods here. I think I can recall maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. Adelaide, Perth and Hobart, 10, 8 and 7%. Yeah, that makes sense. So there's some great numbers there, Alex. And I guess the question as we posed is, what happens moving forward?
Who knows?
I personally think we will never go back to 5% working from home. So where we sat prior to the
for
pandemic.
sure.
I don't think we'll ever return to that.
That's a safe.
that level.
That's the safest thing you can. Oh, we're never going to return to pre.
Well, I don't think we
come
will.
on.
And I think we'll land
Of course we won't.
Yeah, and look, a lot of people are forecasting that we'll land somewhere around 15%, meaning that we've had about a 10% increase as a result of the pandemic from people working at home. And how about this? To put that into numbers, So if we do land on 15% and we've had 10% more people working from home than usual, it takes about 1.3 million Australians out of the daily commute to work into the CBDs, which, you know, would have to suggest we'd be looking at, you know, different city planning, more investment in suburbs, all of that type of stuff. So I think it will have a pretty big impact on you know, the changing landscape socially. And geez, it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Completely different topic for another day, but regardless of work from home culture, we definitely need to better activate and rejig our middle suburbs, regardless of work from home.
Yeah.
Just saying that.
100%. And look, before we do leave this topic, another poppy for you, pop quiz.
Oh my gosh.
What do you think the top industry was that embraced the working from home lifestyle? No, that's the third. So IT, great guess.
That's a great, like they can hack.
Well, they're set up. You can do it. Went from 7% in 2016 to 52% in 2021. Finance and insurance topping the list went from 6% in 2016 to 66% people working from home in 2021. Professional service 13% to 55%. And real estate 7% to 32%.
That's pretty interesting.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
There's obviously industries that didn't change much, like healthcare, hospitality, ones that you can't do from home, and agriculture. Obviously, a lot of people in agriculture are already at home working.
Well, I was going to say, we'll figure that out.
Yeah,
they are working from home.
So
but,
no change there. 27% of people in agriculture, and that includes forestry and mining, work from home, and that went to 28% in 2021.
What? Really? There was a 1% increase. So what would that one? But why?
I don't know.
Did they have an office in the main strip of the regional town?
It's 1% of a pretty solid industry, but and you know, worth noting as well that the workforce in 2021 is 2 million people larger than it was in 2016 as well.
There you go.
So,
and look, I mean, today, just simply put, I'd love to know 2016 to even 2020 how our technology evolved that allowed us to work from home before we had to.
Yeah.
You know, like our technology would have just been off the dial
it's
better.
A great point you make, because then a lot of people have invested in it as well. Hence why I think that we're never going back to those levels, and it will continue, because people have set, you know, like us, for example, this studio, there's a lot of people that have set up Zoom rooms in their house, in offices, spend money on mics and cameras and all of that. So I think it's a phenomenon that's here to stay.
You learn so quickly. Amazing. All right. Well, I want to wrap it up with the dipsticks, but we do actually have a very cool quick shots this week. I'm sorry, I don't know if I told you guys, but I've asked Joel Petter, aka Petter, in our office. Young gun, bought his own property, first home buyer very recently. I want to give him the cold face of questions. What did you do? What do you wish you did differently? Where did you completely stuff up? And what are your learnings for any prospective first home buyer? So I thought, well, let's bring him onto the quick shots, because we get a lot of first home buyers.
I reckon it's a great idea. And although I'm getting the lemonade and sauce, given that there's only 2 mics, I'm happy to sit out and let Jolie, the great man, come in and share his story, because I think it's a fantastic idea.
True.
So I will leave quick shots to you and Joel, but it was a pleasure being here.
Okay.
And might be a bit of a spell for me coming up, probably deservedly so as well.
Look, you deserve a break, to be honest with you.
Well, until next time, Alex.
Until 2023.
I might be working from home.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Double Shot with your favourite cousins, Alex and James Fitzgerald. If you've got a burning question or something we absolutely need to talk about on the pod, please write to us. Both of our emails are in the show notes. For little real estate tidbits and a little bit of banter, a lot of banter, you can follow us on the gram. Our handle is thedoubleshot.podcast. That, my friends, is thedoubleshot.podcast. Until next time, think of us when you sit back and sip your next double shot.